Alright, in this project we will be creating an arcade-style space shooter game. This is a great place to start for a beginner because it will help us build a foundation of skills. The skills you will be learning in Godot are player movement, node collisions, creating new nodes in a scene, counting scores, and understanding game states. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so in this section, we're going to get started creating our space shooter game. We're going to start off by creating a new project for our game. Then we're going to go ahead and navigate to a site called kenny.nl to download our free assets that we're going to be using for the game. Last but not least, we're going to go ahead and import those assets into our new game's art folder. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, let's go ahead and create our new project. We're going to the top left to create. Let's go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to call this space underscore shooter. I'm going to leave it in the current directory. I'm also going to go ahead and create an edit. Let's let that load. There we go. Perfect. Alright. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go into the 2D view. Awesome. And then one more thing we're going to do over here on the folder section. We're going to right click on our rest folder. We're going to go to create new and go to folder. And I'm going to go ahead and just type in art because this is where we're going to house all of our art. Awesome. Alright, so far so good. Alright, next thing we're going to do is download the assets. If you remember, it's going to be at kenny.nl/assets/space-shooter-redux. Alright, once you're here, you can go ahead and select download. It is going to ask you if you want to donate or not. That's completely up to you. So go ahead, download that. Once it's downloaded though, we're going to go ahead and open it up. In our folder, we're going to find that kenny_space-shooter-redux.zip. Now since it's a .zip, we need to extract it. So we're going to right click. We're going to go to extract all. We're going to extract. Let that load, might take a second or two. There's a lot of objects in it, so it takes a while. Awesome. I'm going to go up one folder here. Alright, and there it is. See now how it doesn't have that .zip at the end? That's what we want. So let's go ahead and take that and drag and drop it over here into our art folder. It's going to take a second because it's got to import everything in here. Awesome, there we go. I'm going to minimize this. Alright, now see how it's not in the folder though? We still want to drag and drop it into the art folder. Alright, once we do that, we'll make sure everything's there. Give it a second, and there we go. Awesome. So now we can go ahead and open that art folder up, and you can see that's in there. And if we open it up again, there we go. We got all the backgrounds, we got all the bonuses, PNGs, sprite sheets, vectors, license, all that stuff. Alright, awesome. Alright, now to save your project real quick, you can either hit Control S, or you can go up to the scene on the top left, and you can see Save Scene, or Save All Scenes. I like to do the All Scenes one just in case I'm forgetting something. So I'm going to select that. Perfect. Alright, so far so good. Alright, so in this section, we're going to learn how to create a main scene for our game. We're going to be learning a lot of different components in Godot, starting off with how you can resize your screen to best fit your game. Then we're going to be learning about how to create nodes and how to organize them. Nodes are pretty much the foundation of how we build a game in Godot. And last but not least, we're going to learn how to create a background for our game. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to resize our screen. The current screen size we have is best fit for a PC style game, but the one we're going to create is going to be more of a mobile type, so we need to change it. So to do that in Godot, it's pretty easy. We just have to go to the top left of the project tabs over here, select project settings now, and in general we're going to type in W so we can find that window under display. Go ahead and select that. Awesome. And we're going to get a couple options here. The two that we're going to change is going to be the viewport width and the viewport height. So let's go ahead and change viewport width first. I'm going to change that simply to 540, and I'm going to change the height one to 960. Now we can change this later if we want, but I think this matches the game pretty well. So let's go ahead and close that. Let's let that load. May have to Control S so it refreshes. Awesome. Alright, perfect. This looks like it'll work pretty well. Alright, so now we need to add the actual main scene. So to do that, we go to the left here. We have a couple different options. We have 2D scene, 3D scene, user interface, and other node. So let's select 2D scene, and there we go. There's our first node 2D. So in Godot, everything is going to consist of a node. The player is a node, the player's weapon's a node, enemies, maybe even objects throughout the game, bushes, trees, all that stuff. Even the scenes are a node. So that's why we have this node type 2D as our main scene. All right. If we want to rename the node, simply enough, we can select it and type in what we want, such as capital M, main, which is what I'm going to name this one. Awesome. Even though we changed the name of it, if you hover over it, it'll show you that it's still a node 2D. All right, awesome. So now what we want to do is we need to add something for our background. Okay, so we're going to right click on that main node 2D and do this button here, which is add child node. Then we're going to get a list of all the different types of nodes that we can add. So the one we're going to add is going to be that sprite 2D. So let's type in SP and you'll see that sprite 2D appear, has the little smiley face. Let's select that guy there. Let's hit create. And there we go. Now we have our sprite 2D in here. Let's rename it also, just like we did with the other one. I'm simply going to go ahead and rename it background. Just like that. Awesome. Then what we want to do is, of course, add the art to it. So let's go to the art folder. Let's find our background, which should be this one here. We have a couple different options. We have the black background, the blue background, dark purple, and the purple. I'm going to add the regular purple one in. And there we go. Awesome. Now, next thing we need to do is, of course, put it on the entire screen, because currently it's not going to fully be visible. All right, only this top portion is. So to do that, we can do it in a couple different ways. We can use some of the tools up here, such as the move tool. We could move it right over here if we wanted to, but then of course we need to stretch it out. So we can do that with the stretch tool if we wanted to. I'm not a big fan of this tool because I think it's kind of hard to maneuver. We could also use the regular pointer tool and just grab each corner and stretch it out, which I think I am going to do, just like this. Awesome. There's also another way we could do this as well. If you are selecting it still, background, and go over here to the inspector, you're going to see this transform under the node 2D, and you're going to have all these different options here. We could, one, of course, move the positions of the X, which we could do like that if we wanted to, or you can type it in manually. I'm going to Control Z to bring it back to where it was. Now, for the Y value, though, it's a little different. If you go down with the Y value, it's actually going to move the sprite up, and if you make it go bigger, it's going to move it down. So just remember that when you're given its calculations. I'm going to put it back to the middle like that. Awesome. You could also change the rotation if you wanted to as well, just like that. I'm going to Control Z to bring it back. Perfect. Now you could also change the scale as well. Like if you wanted to make the X values bigger or the Y values, you could do it like that. If you want to be more specific with it, that's completely up to you. I'm going to Control Z to get to the back. Now another cool thing you can do with scale is you can match it. So if you hit this little lock button here and make it lock together, then if you change the X, it'll also change the Y and vice versa. All right, so I'm going to Control Z to bring that back. Awesome. You can also change the skew if you want to. Most people don't mess with this though in the 2D games, but that's up to you. It depends on the game. There's plenty other things we can change on the sprite. We're going to learn about it over time though. But for the background, I think this looks pretty good. I like it. All right, so now the next thing we need to add is going to be some text for the score and also the game over. So how are we going to do that? So we're going to go back to the main node over here. We're going to right click on it, add child node, and this time we're going to add something called a control. All right, you can type in C and it should pop up. It's going to be this green one here. Now a control is kind of like a canvas for all of our UI objects. So any buttons or text or anything like that, we're going to want to put it inside of a control. A control just helps us kind of organize things and also scale them with the UI. All right, so let's create that right there. Now, sometimes though, if you get things mixed up, like what if you put the control inside the background, you can move it out simply by just dragging it and putting it somewhere like in between or at the bottom like that. Just make sure it's not inside the background, okay? Awesome. Next thing we need to do for the control is, of course, scale it appropriately, because currently it's not as big as the screen. So I'm going to use the pointer tool and simply just scale it to about the same size. If you want to be super specific, we could just zoom in and, try to make it match that blue line. But I think for now, this will be okay. I don't really care if it's perfect. Since this is just a beginner tutorial, I just want it to be functional. Awesome. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now, of course, we need to add the actual text. So to do that, we're going to go on the control this time, not the main node, and right-click, add child node, and use something called a label. All right, that's going to be this thing here. So you're going to select that, create, and with a label, we can add some text. All right, so I'm going to stretch this guy out as well, something like that. Perfect. I'm going to go over here on the right and add some text now. So I'm going to call this score : 0. All right. I'm also going to change the name of this to label score. Let's add that there as well. Perfect. Nice to keep things organized. I like it. All right. Now, one thing, if you've noticed, is the text is very small. That's not going to look good for our game. So what we need to do is we need to make it bigger. So to do that, we can go into something called the label settings right over here on the inspector. As you can see, it's set to empty though, so we need to add it. So select it and do that new label settings, okay? Select it again and it should open up and give you font, outline, shadow, and resources. We want to change the font size, so that should be in the font section right here. For size, it's currently at 16. Let's go ahead and change that to something like 50. Enter. There we go. Awesome. Another cool thing, if you haven't noticed, if you hover over any of these, it'll actually tell you a little bit more about it. Font used for text, size used for text size, color. You can even change the color here if you wanted with the nice little color wheel they have. But I kind of like the white for this style of game, so I'm going to keep it the same. I'm going to select somewhere else so that goes away. Awesome. You could even give it an outline if you wanted to, like a black outline around it. That's up to you as well. All right, another thing I want to do is I want to kind of align it a little better. So let's do horizontal align. We're going to keep that at left. If you wanted to put it right, you could. But I think for this game, left looks pretty good. Vertical alignment, top, I actually want to make that center. Okay, awesome. You could even auto wrap it, which is really nice if you want to basically have things automatically scale and wrap when you're having big paragraphs of items. All right, so that looks pretty good for this. I might move this up a little bit with the pointer and maybe a little bit over to the right. Perfect. All right, awesome. I like it. So now the next thing we need to do, of course, is create the game over text. So let's do that. One way we could do it is just simply select label score and Control D, or right click and duplicate. And there we go. We got a label score 2. Let's change the name of this one now to game over after label. Awesome. I'm going to use that move tool and just put it somewhere kind of in the middle, like right there. We'll readjust it later. Now, of course, we need to change the text. I'm going to change that to game over. Now, one thing you can get in trouble with, though, when just duplicating labels, is it will actually copy the same label settings. And what does that mean? If we select label settings and I want to change the size of my game over text, change it to something like 70, it's actually going to change the original one as well. So we don't really want that. So I'm going to Control Z to bring that back. And what we need to do is we need to clear the original label settings on the one we're working on. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to clear, then I'm going to add a new one, and simply enough, I'm going to go to font and change this to 70 again. And there we go. Awesome. Now I'm going to go ahead and move this over to the left a little bit with the move tool, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and change my horizontal alignment to center, make sure that vertical alignment is center as well. Awesome. Now we can adjust this later more later if we want to, but for now I think this is good. Now one more thing we need to change on here though is, of course, we don't want the game over text to be visible all the time. So how can we get rid of that? So we can either change it from here with this little eyeball and close it so it won't be visible, or we can also go down here on the right on the inspector, which I recommend more, and open up the visibility and turn off visible. So by selecting that, there we go. Now down the road in the scripting of the course, you're going to learn how to connect your script to all these different values in the inspector for each node. All right, that'll be a later thing, but just want to be aware of that. All right, so far so good. So now the last thing we need to do is, of course, save the scene. So you can either Control S or you can go up to Scene on the left and select Save Scene, just like that. Awesome. If you go down here on the left, you're going to see the scene now, which is that main.tscn. So that's our main scene, okay? So now, of course, let's test it out. Let's go to the top right, select the play button. It's going to ask if you want to make this the main scene, and yes, we do. So let's select current, and let's let that load, and perfect. I like it. I like how the entire thing looks. I like the text. I like how the shape looks. Awesome. All right, let's close that with the X. All right. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the player body. We're going to start off by creating the player body with an area 2D. Then we're going to go ahead and give the player a ship sprite, Last but not least, we're going to add a player collision shape 2D. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's get started creating the player body. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the main node and we're going to right click. We're going to add child node and we're going to look up the area 2D. Now an area 2D is basically like a player body but without any physics to it, all right? And that's what we want for this type of game because we're going to be a spaceship just moving side to side shooting lasers, all right? But the one thing we do have to add to an area 2D is a collision. That's what this little warning here is. It's asking for a certain type of collision. So we can add that as well. Let's right click, add child node, type in COL, and you should see that collision shape 2D. You could also add a polygon one if you want to, but I think for this game, a collision shape 2D will work pretty good. All right, so let's add that in there. There we go. Now you're also going to get a warning saying there should be a shape to it. So we need to add a shape to it. To do that, all we got to do is select a collision shape 2D, and then over here to shape, it's at empty, so we just need to add one. So for this one, I'm just going to add a new circle shape 2D for now, okay? Now we don't really have an image for this guy, so we need to add that as well. So we're going to right click on area 2D, add child node, and we're going to add, if you guessed it, a sprite 2D. Let's add that sprite 2D in there, perfect. Now before we start editing things, let's rename everything correctly. So the area 2D, I'm going to go ahead and change that to capital P player, all right? Because that's going to be our player node. Then for our sprite 2D, let's change that to player, capital B body, just like that. Awesome. So our player body needs some art, so let's add that. Let's look in our art folder and locate the PNG, and we can go ahead and find the players or just ships. I don't think it's in one actually, it's just open like this. So let's pick one out. You can choose whichever one you want. I like this little green one that looks like a triangle, so I'm going to take that, drag and drop it into our player body. Awesome. All right, if you zoom in a little bit with your mouse wheel, you can see the player. Now let's select player body again. One thing I like to do though whenever I add sprites is I like to go over to the texture area over here under canvas items and set the filter instead of inherit to nearest. It just kind of makes it a little less blurry and a little bit more defined. All right, so I'm going to go to the background as well and do that same thing. Open up texture, select nearest, and there you go. Makes it a little more clear and a little more pixel perfect overall. All right, awesome. All right, so here's our player. We might make him a little bigger because I think he's a little small. So if you remember, we can go over to the player body, and simply enough, we're going to go to that transform and set its scale. I'm going to keep it unlocked and just change it to a 2 and see how that looks. It might be too big. Yep, that's a little too big. I think I just want to do a little bigger than it was before, so like a 1.2, enter, and there you go. Now because we had it locked, it's going to match both of them to the same. Perfect. All right, next thing we want to do is move our player. Now one thing to remember about this is we don't want to move just the player sprite, because if I do that right now and I move the player sprite like over here and we give the functionality script to the main one here and move it, it's not going to be correct. See how it's moving it like that? So whenever we move our player, we always want to be moving the main node, not just the sprite mode. So I'm going to control Z so it goes back to where it was. There we go. So let's move it from the main node right here. I'm going to move that over there. All right. Now the last thing we need to set, of course, is the collision shape. So if you remember, we added a circle shape right there. If we zoom in, you're going to see that circle shape. It's going to be a little small, so we need to make sure it's a little bigger, all right? So if you can use this little circle here, you should be able to expand it and de-expand it, just like that. Now, why is this not really covering, though, the ship? That's because the ordering. So our player body is below the collision shape. So we should move that above it like that so we can make sure we're exactly where we want to be, all right? Awesome. So let's move that collision shape down a little bit because I think if it's in front, it's not going to look like the enemies actually hit the player. All right, so let's move it down there. Maybe decrease the size a little bit to something like that, okay? And you can adjust this however you want, but I think for this type of game, it'll look pretty good. Awesome. All right, let's zoom out a little bit. Now, one thing to note also is the ordering of the layers, okay? Now, because we have the player below the background and everything, he's not going to be behind it. But what if we wanted our player above it here, but still visible? Now what we could do is simply open this up, select our player body here, go down, and find the ordering, okay? And we have this thing called a Z index. So if you've ever used any game development tools, we know we have the X, Y, and Z plane. Z plane is the in and out. Usually it's used more in 3D games, but we can also use it in a 2D game to help our ordering. So let's say I want my player to be above the background, but I still want it to be visible. So what I could do is just change the z-index to something higher. So I put it at 5 and hit enter. There you go. Now it's above. Now also make sure to change your collision shape as well if you're doing that. So I'm going to do that one as well for collision shape 2D. I'm going to go to ordering, and I'm going to change that z-index to 5 as well, so it's still above. Perfect. Awesome. All right, so far so good. Don't forget to save. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the player's script. We're going to start off by creating the script itself and attaching it to the player. Then we're going to go ahead and add some functionality to make the player move. Last but not least, we're going to add another function to give the player a state. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the player script. All right, so we're going to go ahead, make sure you're selecting the player right here. To add a script to an object, you can simply hit this little script with a plus button right here. So go ahead, select that. We're going to name it as just player.gd, so you can keep that the same. Go ahead to create. All right, so we got a couple things to go over here. Before we do though, let's get rid of both these little functions right here. We don't need those for now. Now one thing to understand is this extends area 2D. This is defining the type of object that we have the script on. So again, remember this is an area 2D, the player type. So if you had something else such as a rigid body or maybe a control or even just a plain node 2D, you would have to define it here up at the top with extends. All right, awesome. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a couple variables that we're going to be using throughout this script. Let's go ahead and add those on line 3. So the first variable we're going to do is going to be an @export space var for variable, and we're going to call this the laser underscore tcsn. Use a semicolon there, and then we're going to go ahead and call it the type of object it is, which is a packed scene. Go ahead, select that. There we go. So now this export variable is basically going to allow us to drag and drop something into our player that we can use later. So if you go to the inspector right here on the player, you're going to see that laser tcsn is empty currently. Now later on we're going to create the laser, but that basically just allows us to export it and also give it a name. All right, awesome. So make sure you have that there. Now the next thing we're going to do is going to be an @onReady var. We're going to call this lowercase main, uppercase scene, equal sign this time, and we're going to equal it to where our main scene is going to be, which is going to be this one here, because eventually we're going to attach a script to it that we're going to hold all of our global variables that we're going to need for multiple types of scripts. So like if we need to access some sort of score or health or something that is not simply attached to the player or enemies or lasers, we want to be able to access that whenever the game's playing, okay? So that's why we have that main scene, and we're equaling it to that. All right, that onReady, all it's doing is just kind of the complete opposite of export. It's going to find something that currently exists versus the export is something that currently does not exist. All right, awesome. All right, so next thing we're going to do is create some functions now. So we're going to create a function with func space, and we're going to use a built-in function called underscore process with delta inside of it, and then a semicolon at the end. So this function here is basically like an update function. It's going to be running all the time throughout your game. So anything that's going to need to be checked or executed throughout the game is going to be inside this type of function. So let's say your player needs to check if its health doesn't equal to 0. We're going to put that in here. Maybe inputs for all the keys you're going to be using or buttons, that's going to be in here as well. All right, because we need to check things over and over again in case they're going to happen. All right, awesome. So let's go ahead and add some things in here. We're going to go ahead and add a var variable. We're going to call it mouse underscore POS for position. We're going to go ahead and equal this now to a built-in function from Godot. It's going to be called get underscore global mouse position with a parentheses set at the end. Now all this is doing is getting our X and Y value of our mouse currently on the screen. Because if you remember, we're going to build the type of game where the player is going to move left and right depending on where the mouse is. All right, awesome. So we can get that from right here. Now the next thing we need to do is actually set the player to that value. To do that, simply enough, we can just type in position because that's going to be our position of the current player. Think of when you're using things like position or just anything without something before it, you're actually doing something like this where it's self dot position. This does the exact same thing because self is just defining that it's this object, which is the player right here, because this is the one with the script attached to it. All right. A cleaner way to do it is just remove the dot self, but you can add the dot self if you want to. That's fine. Now we're going to be using position dot x because we're only going to be moving the x value of our player because we want him to move side to side. We don't want him to move up, down, left, right. So if you did want the game where you got the player moving everywhere with the mouse, then you would want the x and y position. All right, or you could just get rid of x and equal to mouse position. But we want the x value to stay, so we're going to keep that. So we're going to use mouse position because we want to make our position.x of the player equal that mouse position of the get global mouse position. All right, awesome. All right, make sure you got that down. That's going to be for the player's movement. All right, awesome. Now, next thing we're going to do is create the input for shooting a laser. So let's do that. It's going to be an if statement. So we're still inside the function process, but we're going to do if, capital I, input. Here we go, dot. And we're going to use is action just pressed. That's another function in Godot. So we're checking if something is pressed. And inside of those parentheses, we have to say what action is pressed. And we're going to make this right after we finish the script. We're going to create an input called fire, just like that. Use a semicolon there and hit enter. Okay, awesome. So it's checking for a specific action named fire. And you're going to see how we can create those. It's super simple in Godot. But let's finish up the script first. So now inside of this if statement, inside the process, we're going to go ahead and add another variable. We're going to call this new underscore laser equal laser underscore TCSN. Because remember, we're using this laser by attaching it, and then we need to initiate it now when we fire. So we're going to do that there. Then we're going to have to actually initiate it. So create it into the game, which is going to be a dot initiate function. So dot initiate is just basically making that object alive in our current scene. All right, awesome. So now that we have it alive, we need to make sure it is located and created correctly. So the next thing we're going to do is do add sibling. And then inside of there, we're going to pass in that new laser. All right. So what is this doing? All this is doing is creating a sibling of the object that it's coming from. So on player. So it's not going to be inside the player, it's going to be next to the player, and that's exactly what we want, because we don't want the bullets to be moving with the player, we only want it to be moving in the world around it. All right, so that's what that add sibling is. If we did something like add child, it would be a child of it. If we did something like add parent, it would be a parent of it. All right, but we're doing add sibling. All right, make sure you have that there. Perfect. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and initiate its location. So we're going to grab that new laser again. We're going to do a dot position for the laser, and we're going to set that to self dot position. So we could just set it to position, but I think it looks a little better if we do self dot. All right, awesome. All right, so far so good. So now we have the creation of our laser when we press the fire button, which we are going to set in just a bit. Now let's add one more function now, and this is going to be for the entering of an enemy. So like if an enemy runs into the player, we need, of course, the game to be turned off. So how can we do that? We can either create it by hand, or we can do something pretty cool. Select the player, go over here to the right, and now that we're on the specter, select node, and we can use something like this. Area entered, mine's green because I was using it before. I'm going to remove that so we can start from scratch. I'm just going to delete that, disconnect. There we go. So we have a bunch of different nodes we can use, which is basically just pre-built functions that we can add into our script. Now we want this top one specifically, this area underscore entered, area 2D. Now there's exited, there's shape, there's all these different ones, but this area entered is because we're having the enemy run into us, and we need something to happen, of course, when that occurs. So let's select that, area entered. Make sure it is selecting the player because that's where the script is. Let's connect it, and there we go. So now it gives you that pre-built function, and you can tell it's connected by that little green button right there. And it also is shown over here as well. All right, so now we need to add some things inside of it. So we need to go ahead and add an if statement. So we're going to do if space area, because that's the area that we're using. This value up here, it's a area being passed in, so whatever is actually hitting it is going to be inside of there. So we're going to do area dot is underscore in underscore group. And we're going to go ahead, give it some parentheses, and define what area it is. So if this area group is equal to enemy, which is kind of like a tag, and you're going to learn how to create those once we make the enemy, then we're going to want something to happen. Now we're going to want a couple things to happen. We're going to want, of course, the object to be destroyed, so the player to be destroyed. To do that in Godot, it's pretty easy. We can use something like self dot queue free, which is basically like destroy. So if we queue free it, it's going to destroy it in the current scene. All right. Now, other than that, we also need to do one more thing, is set the game over. Now we're going to create all those global variables and settings and scenes and all that in the main scene, which we're going to create in the next section. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to do main scene dot is underscore game underscore over. And we're going to equal that to true. Now this is game over is going to be a Boolean value that we are going to set in the main script that we did not create yet. So we're going to create that pretty soon. But that's all this is doing. It's accessing a specific variable in a script called isGameOver equals true, or we're setting it to equals true. Of course, it'll be equals false until we run into an enemy with the tag of enemy. All right, awesome. So make sure you have that there. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and save this by Control S. Perfect. Now let's create those inputs of fire. All right. Now to do that in Godot, it's pretty easy. We go to the top left to project again, go to project settings, and here you have the input map. All right. This is where we can create those inputs. All right. So let's add a new one, which is right here, this add new action. We're going to call it fire. We're going to go ahead, select add. Awesome. So now we have this input. Now we need to set what initiates this, what type of click or what type of tap, what type of key. Now to do that, it's pretty easy. We go to this little plus button, not the trash can, hit the plus button. And then all you have to do is either type in the key you want, such as spacebar. I'm going to add that for one. As you can see, it's already there. I'm going to hit OK. So spacebar will initiate that fire. We can also do another one. I'm going to do right click, so we can go to mouse, open that up. And if you scroll up, you should see that right click or left click. Actually, I'm going to do left click. I think that will work a little better. And I'm going to select OK. And there we go. So now this fire input is initiated whenever we have space or left mouse. So go ahead and hit close. And there you go. Awesome. All right. So far, so good. All right. So in this section, we're going to create the main script. We're going to start off by creating the script itself. Then we're going to go ahead and add some global variables for the state. Then, last but not least, we're going to create a function to reset the game. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the main script. Now to do that, we're going to go ahead, select our main node right up here. We're simply going to go ahead and add a script to it with that button up there. We can keep the name as main.gd. Let's go ahead and create that. Awesome. So let's get rid of all these functions below it. Now, as you can tell, that extends is now equal to a node2d because this is a node2d type. All right, now let's go ahead and add a couple variables in here. Let's start off creating one for the actual script itself, or the score. So we're going to do var score equals 0. Then we're also going to do one for the bool of isGameOver, similar to what we just used in the player.gd. So we're going to do var, and we're going to do is underscore game underscore over equals false. Now, if you remember, this is game over is also being set from over here, because remember, when our game is over, we want to set that to true. And we're getting that from that main scene, which we are getting from up here with that on ready, equaling the $ quotations ... All right, awesome. Let's go back to the main. All right, so now that we have our variable for 0 score and also game over equaling false, we need to create a function for resetting the values when the game is over. All right, so we're going to do function reset underscore values, empty set of parentheses, semicolon. All right, enter. Next thing we're going to do is score equal 0 because we want to reset the score. We also want to go ahead and do is underscore game over and set that back to false. All right, awesome. All right, make sure you have that there. Go ahead and save that. Now we should be able to test our game out. Let's go ahead and do that. Hit play. Oh, looks like we're getting an error right over here. It brought us over here. So this is on our player.gd. We're getting an error because of the x with value of type vector 2. Now this is a good little thing to notice is when we do have an error in our scripts, it's going to pop up over here. You can get a little better view with this little errors section where it tells you the parameter delta. This is I know this one is just a warning, but the one over here is the error, okay? This warning is actually coming from that delta, and that's because we're not using it. So this specific script is not going to use the delta value. So to prevent that error from popping up, we can do an underscore, just like that, before the word delta, and it shouldn't happen anymore. I'm going to clear that for now. But this one here is because we didn't set that mouse underscore position to .x, because remember, we need to set our position.x to mouse.x, and that's because this function here that we're getting it from is giving us a x and a y, but we only want to set that .x for our position. That's why we need to put .x here as well. All right, awesome. Let's save that. Control S. I'm going to stop the current game, hit play again, let that load up, and there we go. Awesome. So now our little spaceship here moves around with our mouse. I like it. Now what we could do is we could lower this a little bit. I kind of don't like how high up it is. Let's go to X here. Let's go to 2D view. Let's select the player here. Use that move tool, and I'm simply going to bring it down just a little bit. Let's do something like that. Let's save that. Let's hit play and see how that looks. Awesome. All right, I like it. I'm going to go ahead, close this, save it again. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the laser object. We're going to start off by creating the laser from an area 2D. Then we're going to go ahead and add the sprite for the laser. And then last but not least, we're going to add a collision for the laser. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the laser. So first thing we're going to do is create a new scene for it. And we can simply do that by going to the top left on scene and go to new scene. Awesome. This scene specifically is going to be a other node type of an area 2D. All right. So type in AR and you should see area 2D. Select that. Go ahead and create. Awesome. All right. So we need to do a couple other things for our area 2D. First thing is I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it capital L laser. Enter. Awesome. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it, add child node. I'm going to create a sprite 2D for it as well. That's going to be the actual, shape and artwork of the laser. Let's go find the laser we want to use. I'm going to scroll down here on the left to find lasers. Should be in here. Maybe it's not called laser section. It might be called, no, there it is right there, lasers. Let's open that up. Let's use the one that matches our ship. It's a green one, so I'm going to use a green laser. You can use any one you want. I just want to select one that looks pretty good. Let's try this one first. One's a little big. I don't really like that one that much. Let's try this one. Not my favorite. Did we already try this one? I like this one. There we go. So laser green 08.png I think is pretty good. So let's use that. Let's zoom in a little bit here. All right, so now that we have our laser image, we also need to give it a collision. So let's go ahead, right click on laser again, add child node. Let's do a collision shape 2D. Let's select that, go to create. Awesome. Now we need to make sure we are selecting it again because we need to give it its actual shape. So go ahead to the inspector of it and you should see the shape area right over here. Select it and let's do we could do a capsule because it kind of looks like a capsule shape. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to make this side a little smaller. Make sure I'm using the pointer tool though. Let's make that a little bit so it kind of matches up with the laser. Let's scroll up a little bit and there we go. Awesome. That fits pretty well. All right, perfect. Now what we could do is, let's zoom out a little bit. Now what we can do is save it. So let's Control S. Let's save that laser. Awesome. Now one other thing I want to do though is I want to make sure it's the right layering, because remember this is going to be probably below everything. So I think if we select back on main and select our player right here, or actually our player body. We can scroll down to the layering. We did 5 for this one, and for the collision shape we did 5, and I think for the background we didn't change it. It should just be the same. So if I go to ordering, it's 0. So if we just make it anything in between 0 and 5, it will be below the ship but also above the background. So let's go ahead and add that. I'm going to go back to laser. Let's go ahead and make each one of these orderings and the correct one. I'm just going to make this 4 for now. And same thing for the collision shape. I'm going to do the ordering and I'm going to make that 4. Awesome. All right, perfect. Now, one more thing I think we got to make sure is that it's going to be still above the score. So how can we test that? Well, simply enough, if we save the laser, so Control S, go back to main, we can drag and drop in that laser. So let's do that real quick. We won't keep it there, but I just want to see it for now. So this laser.tscn, let's take that guy and let's just put him inside of our main. All right, so let's go ahead and move it where we want it. So let's say our laser shoots out of our enemy. I want to make sure that it stays behind it. So is it behind the ship? Yes, it is. And it's above the background. Awesome. One more thing I want to check is if it is above or behind the actual text, and it looks like it's above. So we need to change the layering of our score label text. So let's do that as well. I'm going to move that down, or actually I could just keep it there for now. Let's select our score text. Let's go to the ordering of this as well. So ordering. The index of this I'm going to make, because we want this to be above everything, let's just make it 10. Let's do 10 for that. There we go. And we could do 10 also for the label game over. Let's do ordering over here. Let's set that to 10 as well. Awesome. One more thing I think we could do is we can make the laser a little bigger if we wanted to. I think it's a little small. So I'm going to delete this one here. So delete key it to get rid of it. It's not going to delete our original one we have. So let's make this a little bigger also. We might have to increase the entire thing because I don't think we can. No, we can do it from here, I think. Transform. Yep. So let's make this let's try it and see what 2 looks like. It might be a little too big, because I could double it. Maybe we'll do a 1.5 instead. Awesome. Let's save that, Control S. Let's go back to the main scene. Let's go ahead, drag and drop the laser into here. Oops. Well, I didn't drag and drop it into the main scene. Make sure you do that. There we go. Oh, I like that. That one looks pretty good to me. I'm going to take that with the move tool. Awesome. Yep, that looks pretty good to me. Doesn't look too big or too small. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead though and delete it because I don't want it in the starting scene. There we go. We did change a couple things in here, so don't forget to save it so it keeps your changes. Control S. Awesome. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the laser script. We're going to start off by creating the script itself. Then we're going to go ahead and add the ability for the laser to move. Then we're going to go ahead and add a function for destroying the laser when it collides with an enemy. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and create the laser script, and we're going to create that in the original scene of the laser. So go ahead, you can select it up here. Awesome. Once you're here, let's go ahead and create that script on the main node right here. Attach a script to it. We can keep it as laser. Let's go ahead and create it. Awesome. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of everything in here. Again, notice how the extends area is a 2D because that's the main node type. Perfect. Let's go ahead and add a variable here. We're going to add an at export, and we're going to go ahead and call a variable. We're going to call this the speed, semicolon, and we're going to describe it as a float equals 600. So sometimes in Godot, well, normally in Godot, you can describe something without actually telling the type. But because we're using the at export, we want to tell it exactly what type it is. Because if we just put 600 here, it's going to think it's an int. But because maybe we want to make the speed specific, like a 600 point something, then we want a float type, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that, because 600 by default should be pretty good. I'm going to save this. And then you can also notice that it has that speed over here. So if you wanted to, you could honestly just set it over here as well. And that's why we want it, because we don't want to go into the code for every little change we have. We want to be able to edit things from the inspector sometimes, all right? Awesome. So make sure you have that there. Perfect. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the function to help it move, which we're going to use that process function we've used before. So underscore process delta. Then we're going to go ahead and set the position dot y, because we're going to have the lasers shooting up from the player. We're going to minus equal that to our speed, which is 600 currently, times that delta. Now we're using delta because, again, we're going to be running this over and over again on a frame rate process, and we want to make sure it's always going to be the same for all the games running. So if you have a computer faster than another computer, we want to make sure that the same speed is applied for all computer types. All right, that's why we're using that times.delta. Okay, now this minus equals is just minus equaling it over time, over and over again. All right, and you'll see that in action in just a bit. So that's going to be good for that function. Now we need a function to destroy the object once it collides with an enemy. So this is going to be pretty similar to the function we had in the player. So we're going to do function, or actually we can go ahead and just do this from the node. So let's select the laser, make sure we select node up here, area entered just like we did with player, double click it, connect, and there we go. Awesome. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. So on area entered, area, so what we want to do is create an if statement. If area dot is underscore in underscore group, and again we're going to use enemy because that's the tag we're going to give our enemies once we create them, semicolon. Then what we want to do is, again, the same thing we did with the player, self dot queue_free, because that removes the object from the game. All right, so once our laser runs into the enemy, it's no longer going to exist. All right, awesome. Let's save that, Control S. Perfect. So we can actually test this out. So let's go back to the main view over here. Let's select the player. And now that we have that laser saved, we can drag and drop it into the inspector for it right over here. So let's find the laser. It should be on the left. Make sure it's not the laser.gd, that's the script. We want to add the actual scene itself, which is the tscn. So take that, and we're going to drag and drop it right over here. Perfect. All right, let's save the scene, Control S. Let's hit play, and we should be able to shoot lasers now. All right, and there we go. Awesome. So now we can shoot lasers with either the space key or the left click because of what we set in the project settings. Awesome. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the enemy. We're going to start off by creating the enemy from an area 2D. Then we're going to go ahead and add a sprite for the enemy. Then, last but not least, we're going to add a collision for the enemy. Let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to create the enemy now. To do that, it's going to be a new scene. So let's go to the top left, select scene, go to new scene. Let's go ahead and create other node. This is going to be a area 2D, just like we did with the laser. So let's select that. Perfect. Let's go to 2D view real quick. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and rename this though. I'm going to call this, go uppercase enemy. Awesome. All right, from there, we're going to go ahead, right click on it. We are going to add a sprite 2D. There we go. Now we got to, of course, find which enemy sprite we want to use. So let's go ahead and find one of those. I'm going to go ahead, scroll up here. Let's go ahead and find that. I'm going to close the lasers one. Where is the enemies? Here we go. I'm going to use a orange enemy. I'm going to use this one right here, the enemy red 3. So I'm going to take that, drag and drop it on my sprite 2D. Awesome. All right, perfect. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a collision. So again, on the enemy area 2D, let's go ahead, add child node, collision, shape 2D, create. Awesome. Let's go ahead and give it a shape on the right on the inspector. Let's go ahead and give it a circle shape 2D. We're going to zoom in a little bit. Make sure you are using the pointer tool. Let's go ahead and increase this so we can get the size of it correct. I'm going to do something like that. You can adjust that however you want, but I think for this game, it'll look pretty good. Now, if you remember, we need the ordering correct also. So what we want to do is just make sure it's above the background. So I'm just going to set it to 2 for each. So I'm going to start with the sprite 2D. We're going to go to the ordering. Z-index, I'm going to make that a 2. Enter. For the collision shape 2D, same thing. Open up the ordering. Make that Z value a 2. Awesome. All right, the last thing we do need to do is give it that enemy tag. So we have to do that on the area 2D. Make sure you're selecting this one here. Then what we want to do is go to the node section and go to groups. This is where we can add these little tags, okay? So I'm going to add a filter. I'm going to go ahead and give it enemy lowercase, because if you remember, that's going to be the same one that we're calling. Oh, looks like we don't type it there. We type it here, enemy. There we go. Hit OK, and there we go. Awesome. So now we have an enemy tag on there. Awesome. I'm going to close it, get rid of that. Now, if you remember, this is going to be the same thing we're calling. So let's go ahead and go to the script section. And you should see that for the laser, that's going to be this here. So that's why we're setting our enemy with the group tag of this. All right, because we're going to have it affect the laser, and we're also going to have it affect the player. Okay, awesome. So make sure you have that there. I'm going to go back to 2D. I'm going to Control S to save everything we did. Control S. It's going to ask where you want to save it. I'm going to save it right here. And there we go. Awesome. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the enemy script. We're going to start off creating the enemy script and attaching it to the enemy. Then we're going to go ahead and add some code to make the enemy move. Then we're going to go ahead and add some code to make the enemy be destroyed. Let's go ahead and get started. Right, let's go ahead and get started creating the enemy script. So let's go ahead, select the main node of the enemy right over here. Let's add a script to it. We can keep it as enemy. Let's create that. Awesome. So let's go ahead and get rid of these functions below. Now we're going to add a couple variables in here. We're going to add an export first, var, and this one's going to be called speed. We're going to go ahead and give this a colon and a value type of float, just how we did with the player and the bullet. We're going to go ahead and equal this to 400. Awesome. Next one we're going to do is going to be for the main scene. So let's go ahead and do an onReady var, and we're going to call this main scene. And for now, we're just going to equal this to a $, single quotes, and a dot dot. Okay, we might have to change this later, but for now, for testing purposes, this is what we'll keep it as. All right, now next thing we're going to do is give some functionality to make the enemy move. Let's do that. We're going to create a function. This one's going to be the underscore process delta one. Let's go ahead and add that there, do an enter there. Awesome. So we're going to make the enemy move by using position dot y, because we're going to make the player go downward, and we're going to use y there. Now, because we want our player to move down, we're going to have to do a minus, so we're doing a minus equal, because in Godot, if you remember, when an object moves downward on the y plane, it's going to be a negative, and actually no, when an object moves upward, it's going to be a positive. All right, so down is up and up is down, basically. I know it's a little confusing, but you'll get the hang of it after a while. All right, so then we're going to do plus equals to speed times delta. Awesome. All right, there we go. So that can make our enemy move now. Perfect. Let's do the next function for when the enemy runs into an enemy, or when the enemy runs into a laser. All right, so let's select the main node here. We're going to go over to node. So from the inspector, go to node and make sure we select the area underscore entered. Select that. Make sure we're selecting the enemy script right here. Connect it, and there we go. Awesome. Let's add the if statement now. All right, so let's go ahead. Or actually, we don't need an if statement, because if anything touches the enemy, we'll have it defeated. So if a bullet runs into him, or if he crashes into the player. So let's go ahead. We're going to do a self dot queue_free, because we want to destroy the object. Awesome. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to do a call to the main scene. So main scene dot score plus equals 10, because every time we defeat an enemy, we want to add 10 points. Okay, awesome. All right, let's go ahead and save that. Perfect. Now we can test this out actually. So let's go ahead and go to the main and simply just find the enemy. Make sure it is the TSCN one, not the GD. So let's grab that guy and put it into the main node. There we go. Go to the 2D view and simply just move it over, put it somewhere like right here so we can see it coming down and we can interact with it. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go ahead, run the game, and I'm going to shoot the enemy, and there we go. Awesome. Let's see what happens though when we crash into it. I'm going to close that, hit play again. And what happens when we run into it? There we go, we both get destroyed. Awesome. All right, everything's looking good so far. I like it. For now though, let's go ahead and remove this enemy, because eventually we're going to add a enemy spawner where they're going to spawn into, instead of just having them by static over here. So let's delete them. Perfect. All right, so far so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the enemy spawner. We're going to start off by creating the enemy spawner with a node 2D. Then we're going to add a timer to it and make sure all the settings are set correctly. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the enemy spawner objects. So first thing we're going to do is make sure you're on the main scene over here. We're going to go ahead and right click the main node right over here, add a child node, and we're simply going to add a node 2D first. Let's go ahead and create that. Make sure you have a node 2D here. Let's go ahead, double click it, and we're going to rename it enemy spawner. Awesome. We can leave everything else the same in the enemy spawner. This is going to be basically just our parent area of where we want our enemies to spawn. So let's go ahead now and add the timer. We're going to right click on it, add child node, and simply add timer, which should be right over here. It should look like this one. Select it, go ahead and create. Awesome. So this timer is really helpful in Godot. It basically allows us to set specific timers for different things, and we can communicate it with the script. All right, but for now, let's make sure the actual settings in the inspector are set, such as the wait time. I think 1 second is a pretty good time for all the enemies to be spawned. So every 1 second, a new enemy will spawn. You can adjust this if you want to. That's completely up to you. The next thing I want to set though is this auto start. Auto start just basically means the timer will initially start when the game is turned on. All right, awesome. All right, make sure you have all that down. Don't forget to save. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the spawn script. We're going to start off by creating the script on the main object. Then we're going to go ahead and add a variable for the enemy. Then we're going to add the function for the actual spawning in of the enemies. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started creating the script. So first thing we're going to do, of course, is select our enemy spawner. We're going to go ahead and add a script. Let's go ahead, keep the name enemy_spawner. Let's go ahead and create that. Perfect. Let's go ahead and remove everything inside of it. All right, let's go ahead and add that variable for the actual enemies. So we're going to do an @export for this. We're going to give it a var. Then we're going to go ahead and do enemy_tscn semicolon, and it's going to be a packed scene. Perfect, just like that. Awesome. All right, next up, we're going to go ahead and create the function that actually goes and repeats the spawning of the enemies. But to do that, we're actually going to use a signal from the timer. So let's go ahead and select timer. Make sure you are selecting node over here and signals. Let's go ahead and use the timeout right here. Double click it. Now when you click it here, because we have multiple scripts in this scene, it's going to first give you the option to choose the main one here, but we don't want that. We want to make sure we're using the enemy spawner script. So make sure you're selecting this one here. Perfect. Go ahead, hit connect, and there we go. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and add what we need in here. So first we need to actually spawn the enemy. So we're going to do a var. We're going to do name_enemy equals enemy tscn. And we're going to use that dot initiate just like we did with the laser. Perfect. Awesome. Next up, we're going to go ahead and do a self dot add child. Perfect. And that's because we want to add it as part of the enemy spawner, unlike last time how we added it in the entire node. And that reminds me, if we try to spawn it right now, it's actually not going to like it. But first, actually put the enemy name in there so it knows what exactly it's going to add a child. There we go. Now what I was saying though is it's going to go ahead and throw an error now though, because if you remember in our enemy, we were saying that it was just inside the node, not inside the node and the enemy spawner. So to prevent that issue, we need to add a /... for another file down, okay? So make sure you do that in the enemy script. Let's save that. Perfect. Let's go back to the enemy spawner now. All right, next up is we need the location because we want to randomize the location. We not only want to spawn it right over here, we want to spawn it everywhere, all the way to the end of the screen over here. Let's go ahead and add that. So in here, we're going to create another variable. We're going to call this viewport underscore width, and we're going to make it equal to a get underscore viewport rect, which is going to get that rectangle of our current screen size. Then we're going to do a dot size dot x, because that's the specific value we want, because we really only want that left to right over here. Okay, awesome. Let's go back to script. All right, next up is we need to randomize it. So let's go ahead and do var. We're going to call this rand underscore x equals rand f range, which is basically gets us a random float in between two numbers we give it, which we know it's going to start at 0. And we're going to do a comma and give it its second value, which is going to be that viewport width. So make sure you add that there. Perfect. Awesome. So now that's going to get our random x value we want. Perfect. Next up is we need to set the positions. So let's go ahead and do our new enemy. New underscore enemy should pop up. Let's see what's going on here. Enemy. Oh, I called it name enemy, not new enemy. Whoopsie. Make sure you call it new enemy. You could call it name enemy, but that just doesn't make sense. Okay, name enemy. There we go. Now we got to do a dot position because we're going to set its position. Then we have to do a dot x because we're going to set its x position. And we're going to make that equal to our random x value that we calculated. Perfect. All right, so far so good. I like it. Now we need to do its y value because we need to give it a specific y value. So again, new enemy dot position dot y, and we're going to make that equal to, I think -50 should work, and that's because we don't want the enemy to spawn basically where the player can see it. So if I go to my 2D here, -50 is going to be somewhere up here. You could even do -100 if you really wanted to. That's completely up to you. All right, let's go back to the script. All right, let's go ahead and save this, Control S, perfect. Let's select the enemy spawner because we need to drag and drop the enemy right over here. Let's go ahead and find our enemy. So it should be right here. Make sure it's the TSCN one. Let's drag and drop that in right there. Perfect. Save that again. All right, let's go ahead and hit play and see how it works. Let that load. There's one enemy there. Awesome. There's another. Perfect. Everything looks to work really well. I like it. All right, don't forget to save. So far, so good. All right, so in this section, we're going to create the score script. We're going to start off by creating the script itself. Then we're going to add a function to keep track of the current score. Last but not least, we're going to test it out. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to create that score script now. So make sure we are selecting the label score right over here. Let's add a script to it. We can leave the name the same. I'm going to create that. Perfect. Awesome. So let's go ahead and get rid of what we got here for now. We're going to start off creating a variable. We're going to call this an onReady variable main scene. And we're going to go ahead and equal that to our main scene, which is right up here. So go ahead and just drag and drop it right over here. Awesome. I like it. Next up is we need a function. And we need this function to basically run over and over again, checking to verify whether the score is correct and set. So we're going to go ahead and do a function underscore process like we've done. Process delta. Awesome. Or just a process, not a physics process. Let's get rid of that there. There we go. All right. Next up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a self.text equals. And this dot text is just equaling our current text right over here. So we can interact with the code with those items in the inspector. All right. So self.text equals, in quotes, capital score, colon, space, because that's what our starting text is. Then we have to go ahead and add what we need to it. Now we could add the main scene dot score, but that's going to throw us an error, basically saying we can't combine a string and an int. So we need to convert this into a string so we can combine it with this string. All right. So to do that, we can simply wrap it with some parentheses. And right before the first parenthesis, we can do an str, which will convert it into a string. Awesome. Let's go ahead and save that. Perfect. All right, we should be set here. Let's go ahead, hit play now, and test it out. All right, looks like our score is 0 for now, but as we go up, we're going to get that plus 10 for each one we hit. Awesome. All right, so far so good. Let's go ahead and save. All right. All right, in this section, we're going to cover the game over. We're going to start off by creating a script for the game over. Then we're going to add the functionality for the game over text to appear. Last but not least, we're going to add the ability to restart the game. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and select our label game over. That's where we're going to put our script for the game over. Let's go ahead and add a script to it. Label underscore game over, that's fine. Let's create that. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and get rid of everything we have here. Start from scratch. We're going to get a variable first. So we're going to do an at symbol, and we're going to do an on ready. And we're going to call this main scene. And we're going to make that equal to our main scene. If you remember, it's right up here, so just drag and drop it in right there. Perfect. Awesome. All right, now that we have that, now we need a function that's going to check things over time, and it's going to be our function underscore process delta. There we go. All right, so now, of course, we need to check and make sure if the game is actually over. So we're going to do an if statement for that. If main scene dot is game over equal true. So we do equals when we're checking something versus when we're setting something. When we're setting something, we just do 1, but when we're checking something, we do 2. All right, don't forget colon. All right, next thing we're going to do is a self dot visible. Oops. And we're going to make that equal to true. All right, because if you remember our current label game over here, if I go to scene view, there we go. If we currently have it as not visible, then it's not going to be shown, but if we do, then it is going to be shown, okay? So all we're doing with the code is just making it appear, just like that. Awesome. Let's keep that off, go back to script. All right, we're going to add another if statement now. This one's going to be for actually resetting the game. So we're going to do another if, then we're going to do capital I input dot is underscore action just pressed. And we're going to use one of the preset ones we have in here. We already have our fire one, of course, we made. We could make one for this as well, but I'm just going to use one for the enter key, which is the UI accept. So if you hit enter on your keyboard, it will use this one here. So I'm going to select that there. Perfect. We also want to check, of course, if the game is over. So to do two things in an if statement, we can add an and. Now let's say, though, we wanted to do one where we could do like an or. All you really have to do is just type an or. But for this one, we want to make sure that not only is the button pressed, but the game is over as well. And simply enough, we can just copy this, paste it right here. There we go. Awesome. All right, next up. Now inside of this, we're going to go ahead and actually reset the actual game. To do that in Godot, it's pretty easy. We just do a get underscore tree, which gets our whole tree right over here. And then we use a function that is dot reload current scene, which will reload our current scene. Now, if you remember, we set this as our current scene when we first hit play. So all this is going to do is just reload this whole thing. Now, the last thing we need to do is, of course, reset our values. So we'll do a main scene dot, and I think we did reset values, which is right here. Now, we don't really need to reset these values because we're going to be resetting the whole scene, which is by default going to reset the values. I really just wanted to do this so I could show you that we can access functions through other scripts. So like we're accessing this function even though it doesn't exist here. And we're doing that from over here, which is going to be this one right here where it resets our score and our is game over to false. All right, so let's go back to where we were, which was right here. Awesome. Let's save all our changes. Control S. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead now and hit play and see what we got. So here's our game. We can shoot our enemies still. Awesome. We get points, but there's our game over. Now if I hit the enter key, it resets the game and our values are reset as well. Perfect. All right, things are looking good. Congratulations on completing the first project. In this project, we created an arcade-style space shooter game. We learned a lot about the fundamental skills of Godot, such as what nodes are and how we can use them to build objects. Godot offers us so many ways to create things in our game and tools to interact with them. Now don't be shy to add more to the game if you want to, such as maybe perhaps different types of enemies or even some incoming asteroids.